Chrystia Freeland, Canada's finance minister, tables some ideas on how to combat inflation, food, and gas prices in Canada. She claims she also just found out about supply chain issues from her local hardware store owner. The opposition, Dan Albas' response to Freeland, and the ideas his party has to tackle inflation, food, and gas prices. Here's the clip.
I understand keenly that millions of Canadians drive a long way to the store, and that today they will wince when they fill up their tank and when they buy their groceries. And I know that many of them are asking what their government is going to do about it. So that's what I want to talk about here today. The pandemic has been, we hope, a once-in-a-generation crisis. But like any major crisis, this one has aftershocks, and inflation is chief among them. Inflation is not a made-in-Canada challenge, and it's actually less severe here than among our peers. Inflation in Canada was 6.8% in April. It was 9% in the United Kingdom, 7.4% in Germany, and 9.2% across the OECD. In the US, it was 8.6% in May. So this is clearly a global phenomenon, one driven by factors that no single country is responsible for and that no single country can insulate itself from. We know the causes. First, the pandemic. The shift in demand from services to goods it triggered, and the resulting supply chain snarls, which I heard about very personally just this morning from Marty Wiener at his family-run hardware store in my neighborhood. China's COVID-0 policies have made the world's supply chain problems worse. And then Vladimir Putin illegally invaded Ukraine, forcing up the price of food and fuel. Here in Canada and around the world, that means higher prices at the checkout counter and higher prices at the gas pump. Now, Canada doesn't have a say in Beijing's public health measures, and we clearly aren't consulted when the Kremlin makes its war plans. I sure am not. No single country can solve these global problems. But what we can do is help Canadians weather this newest storm, just as we've done over these past 2 years.
Good afternoon, everyone. So instead of a Minister of Finance coming to this August chamber and presenting a plan to fight inflation, instead Canadians received a lecture from their finance minister at a $1,000 a table lunch in Toronto. Very odd backdrop for a Minister of Finance of a so-called progressive government. So rather than coming forward with a plan to fight inflation, one that would, for example, give Canadians a break at the pumps, one that would help them be able to afford groceries, one that would be able to help them pay for their mortgage as it goes up. Instead, today, Canadians got a lecture from a podium saying that they have it so good, but it's because of world events. And that Chrystia Freeland, rather than working hard until midnight, every night with her deputy, trying to come up with plans to help Canadians in their hour of need, the ones that are struggling right now, instead, she said that her approach would be hurry up and wait. It's unfortunate because Conservatives have been proposing ideas consistently, pragmatic ones that can help us get through this, but instead, Chrystia Freeland re-announced programs that are already indexed to inflation. So rather than helping people in their everyday lives today, instead they have to wait until the next inflation update on their old age security or their Canada Child benefit. So We don't believe that what Chrystia Freeland has put forward is going to help with the struggles Canadians are going through right now, and we are going to continue to press the government by presenting pragmatic solutions. Now, the government so far continues to reject all of them, but when they reject our suggestions, they are not hurting us. It is Canadians right now that are looking for leadership from their government and are not receiving it. So it's our job as Her Majesty's loyal opposition to press the government to get in line with Canadian values and to start working hard for Canadians on their issues and not lecturing them from a podium, telling them how good things are, and that they should hurry up and wait. People are at their kitchen tables making serious decisions right now. 1 out of every 5 is talking about skipping nutritious meals to be able to afford the other things in life. So we will not rest until Canadians start getting the support that they deserve.
And I got my driver's license the day I turned 16. It will help our traditional industries thrive in a changing and competitive global economy, and our small businesses to continue to grow and create good middle-class jobs. We're working out the details of these plans now, because we are very serious about tackling the productivity challenge that remains Canada's economic Achilles heel. Now, as I look around this room, I can see enthusiasm for the concept, lots of nodding heads, but also a little skepticism about whether we can actually get it done. And that's fair enough. Canadians have been hand-wringing about productivity for at least 3 decades. And yeah, you laugh, but it's true, right? How many conversations have all of us been in about that? And we just can't seem to make a difference. But we will this time. And to build your confidence, let me give you 3 examples of big things, big changes that our government has accomplished. We have a carbon price that has been upheld by the Supreme Court and is lauded as a model by the IMF. We have a technology sector here in Toronto that is outpacing Silicon Valley. Yeah, we take it for granted now, but it wasn't so long ago that people thought that would be impossible. And we showed them we could do it. And of course, we have a national child care program, something that had been long promised, 50 years of promises, but never delivered. Major change is possible.
The Minister talked about inflation being a global phenomenon. So I'm wondering, do you think that there are limits on what the government can do to respond to this, given that it is being seen around the world?
Yeah, so I would respond simply that other G7 countries, for example, Germany has a highly industrialized economy and relies heavily on Russian oil and gas. And they have put forward a $16 billion program to deal with fuel costs. So these are the things that other countries are doing. If you look at the United States, President Biden has opened up their strategic reserve to help with rising fuel costs because gasoline is one of the major inputs on inflation. Trevor Tome, an economist from the University of Calgary, has said that in April, the Alberta economy actually saw inflation go down compared to the rest, or I should say it reduced inflation compared to the rest of the country. Why? Is because the Alberta government introduced a tax relief at the pumps by reducing their gas taxes. Again, gasoline is a key input into the economy. Doug Porter, chief economist of the Bank of Montreal, has said that he is concerned that inflation will become entrenched if we continue to have these high energy prices. So this is the reason why other G7 countries are trying to not just protect their consumers from these high costs, but they're actually trying to protect their economies by reducing inflation, by reducing the price, a key input of the economy of gasoline. So again, we've seen the Alberta government do it. That's why Conservatives have been calling for a cut to gas taxes. The GST, for example, is something that can be taken right off at the pump, and Canadians will see that. That will help them to deal with some of the short-term issues when it comes to groceries. But look, this government has basically said, just hurry up and wait. eventually we'll get you with these programs that are being indexed. Canadians don't want a government that will sit back and wait. They want a government that is actually going to burn the midnight oil, literally, trying to make life more affordable. Another key thing that they could do today is they could reverse the 2017 budgetary changes done by the former Finance Minister, Bill Morneau, when it comes to both user fees and a tax escalator on beer and spirits. So every single user fee by the Government of Canada, from port fees to national parks, goes up by inflation. It's pegged to inflation. They could stop that and then therefore stop the increasing inputs that Mr. Porter is talking about, where inflation becomes entrenched and it becomes something that's much harder for the Bank of Canada to do. Look, we've talked to the government about its inflationary spending. They're spending money that we don't have. And even the government has said in its own budget that they actually say that there are some things that they can cut. But they're not doing that. They're not acting for Canadians. Instead, we are receiving lectures on inflation, not action.
So, I began by describing the hostile global forces making life harder here in Canada. I'm going to conclude by talking about how a dramatically changing world offers truly historic opportunities for us here in Canada, tomorrow and in the years ahead. The hopeful and entirely open post-Cold War world order that we tried to build starting on November 9th, 1989, the day the Berlin Wall fell. That ended on February 24th, the day of Vladimir Putin's barbaric and illegal invasion of Ukraine. It's over. In its place, we are entering a new era, a period of friend shoring, a period in which our allies know that it's worth spending a little more to build their supply chains with other democracies. And as the world's democracy, the world's democracies have grown more united in the face of Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine. And as they have grown more united, Canada absolutely stands ready to provide our allies with the resources they need. So we know that the road ahead will be bumpy and that we cannot see around every corner. If the past 2 years have taught us anything, it's that we would be naive to expect otherwise. But for all the challenges we face today, Canada remains the best place in the world to live, to work, to raise a family. Ensuring that remains true for our children will continue to be our focus, my focus, in the weeks, months, and years ahead. A Canada where life is more affordable, where everyone can earn a decent living for an honest day's work, and a Canada where nobody gets left behind. Thank you very much. Merci.
You mentioned a few economists earlier. Most of them would agree that the best way to deal with inflation is by raising interest rates. Are you comfortable with the Bank of Canada continuing to raise interest rates despite the fact that it would have an impact on mortgages and other people who are borrowing money this time?
Bank of Canada has a terribly difficult job, and many critics have voiced out that they should have been raising interest rates earlier, but interest rates, especially large ones, like we saw the Federal Reserve take yesterday, is going to make it more challenging. And again, whether or not they have a soft landing or a much harder one, these are complicated issues. And that's why the government should be trying to reduce its discretionary inflationary spending and not making things worse. Again, reducing the gasoline taxes, reducing the, again, on user fees, the automatic escalator that's linked to CPI. These are common sense solutions the government could do, even on a temporary basis, to help curb inflation. Instead, It's hands off by Chrystia Freeland. Don't worry, it'll eventually come once those indexed support programs catch up with inflation.
Competence and honesty among elected leaders and in our public service matter.